Hello, everybody.
Hey guys!
It's the 30th episode of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.
Woot!
Yay!
Yeah, raise the roof.
Who would have thought that we would make it this far?
Not me. I didn't even think we'd make it to episode 2, honestly.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is crazy. I mean, this is, the episode for March, right? Yeah, the first half of March. That's when we're recording this. Yes. This is it's crazy, you know. We started July 14th last year. It's been like 3/4 of a year now. We've come a long way, so
High
that's
five,
cool.
Devin. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope we did that at the same time, because our
I do too.
Skype is not working with our cameras. We can't
Skype is
see
down.
each other
We
at
don't
all.
know. We could be doing who knows what, and we wouldn't know.
We could be naked and we wouldn't know.
You guys would, though.
Yeah, but we wouldn't at this moment.
So we're obviously not, as you can see. At least I'm not. I don't know about you, Devin.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope you've never confirmed or denied. Devin?
No talk, only dreams now.
Devin?
So, today, what are we
Devin?
talking about, Victoria?
I want a confirm or a denial.
I am wearing clothes.
Okay, good.
What are we doing today?
We're reviewing 2 episodes. And they are Patrick, A Heart of Fire, Part 1, and In a Kingdom Far, Far Away. Or Far Away. Only one.
Except in the other order.
Yeah, in the reverse order that I said.
OAC, number 3, March episode comes out first, because it is March. Definitely, yes.
Yes.
And Patrick, Part 1, because it is March. And on the 17th day of this month, we celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
Was it my idea to review this one or yours?
It was mine.
Okay.
Although I think we probably would have come to the same idea.
Yeah, Patrick, A Heart of Fire is one of my favorite episodes, honestly.
Plus, it's really good. It's a holiday origin
It's
episode,
in my top
which is
10.
cool. And, you know, it's the only St. Patrick's Day episode as far as I can remember.
And it's a
St.
Jared episode! I think this is the first Jared episode we've reviewed.
Probably.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh. So happy. Oh, I love Jared. He's my favorite character.
Not what we're starting with. So, episode 741,
My goodness.
In a Kingdom Far Away. Written by Kathy Buchanan and Nathan Hubler.
So, I'm gonna get my little summary out of the way.
Oh, yes. Almost forgot.
So,
Just as a reminder, Victoria's doing these summaries, especially for the OAC episodes, because obviously a lot of people don't belong to the OAC, just so even if you still watch these reviews, even though you haven't listened to the episode for some reason, I don't know why, then you can still get a idea of what it's about, especially since AIOO Wiki doesn't have detailed plot descriptions for these episodes yet.
okay. So, in this episode, Camilla goes to wit's end and asks what the question, does God ever get tired of us repeating our mistakes, or can we sin so badly that God doesn't or won't forgive our sins? Wit proceeds to tell her the story of Queen Constance, portrayed by Connie, and her advisor Eugene, and Friar Wooten, who in all different ways...
Wootsbury.
What?
I think it's Wootsbury, not Wootenbury.
Whatever.
But
who all in different ways wrong the Duchess, who is Camilla. Wit then, after suddenly ending the story there, and there with them stealing the Duchess's castle and throwing her in jail, shows how they mirrored the sins and redemption of King David, Saul/Paul, and Peter.
respectively.
Yeah. And so then after Camilla asks him to finish the story, he continues where he left off and has the Duchess forgive all of the people who wronged her after they apologize and give her back her castle and take her out of jail. So then Camilla takes this newfound knowledge and uses it to rule the world with an iron fist, crushing all who dare to oppose her because she decides that Queen Constance is her new role model.
Yes.
Yes, that last part
should
totally
also
happens.
Make the slight correction that Wootsbury, either way, the friar, he doesn't steal her castle, he abandons her. But either way, she's wronged by all of them.
He was going to testify for her in court that she wasn't trying to, like, overthrow the queen, but he totally ditched her.
Because he was threatened.
Like Peter.
To do so. Yeah.
Well, Peter wasn't
threatened. Well, Peter wasn't
but
threatened, but he felt threatened.
You know what we mean.
Yes.
So.
I think you're probably familiar with what happened.
Hopefully.
It's really nice that we get to see this progression of Camilla and her faith now, since, album 57. She started a Bible study with some of her friends and stuff, and was asking more questions. We're actually seeing a progression with that, which is cool. I really didn't notice that her VA had changed in the last album, really. I knew about it, so I kind of picked up on ever so slightly, but it really started standing out to me a lot more the first time I listened to this episode, in the first scene already.
Yeah. It, I noticed definitely last time, so I've definitely been thinking about it in episodes with her nowadays.
I really like having Andre narrating, because it feels a lot like passages, since, we had a taste of him as that, basically, before we had a taste of him as Wit. So it feels really familiar having him narrating a story like that.
So I'm just going to come out and say I did not... This episode, drove me crazy. And then, I was listening to it, and the whole time I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so painful. And then all of a sudden, the Eugene and Connie, I'm just going to call them that because it's way easier.
Yeah.
They take Camilla's castle, and then, Wooten abandons Camilla, and then Witch is and that's the end of the story. And then, at the same time, me and Camilla are both like, what? And then I'm like, no, I want a happy ending to this story. And I'm like, ow, what? And then I look at the time for the episode. The episode's, I think it's just past the halfway point, and I'm like, so what's the last half gonna be?
Oh, it's more than that. It was quite close to the end by that point, actually.
So I'm like, so are they just gonna, talk for the last couple of minutes? And then I was, in complete shock, and I was actually kind of upset. I'm like, you can't just end it there, and then Wit saying...
People will wrong you and hurt you and cheat you.
And then Wit saying the moral,
bad,
and then I just pause while Wit's just, explaining everything, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then he finishes the episode, and then I'm just like, I can't tell if that was a good episode or a really bad episode. I'm so torn about this episode. It's ridiculous.
I had quite the adventure listening to this episode, and it's captured by, my live annotations going through the first time. So, as the story starts, I was almost immediately very excited about Eugenius.
It's funny because that's why while we were reviewing The Launch Part 2, I'd already listened to this by then. So when we were calling, Eugenius, I was like, once you listen to Kingdom Far Away, this is going to be really funny.
Huh. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like 5 out of 5 for this right now in this episode for using Eugenius for the first time since album 12. I wasn't even born last time this was used. Yes. So, I had this thing going through the episode. I was figuring, Wit's probably modeling this after a Bible story. That makes sense. That's the kind of thing he would do.
That's what I thought,
spent
too.
Forever, most of my notes here are trying to figure out what the heck this Bible story is supposed to be. Which one is it?
I thought it was Esther.
Once we find out, obviously... You're like, okay, that's why it was confusing, because it was 3 different stories put together. So my first thought was, is this Esther then? But it's moved into a post-Jesus kind of context, because they're talking about
Esther, but they just took some things from Esther, but it wasn't Esther. I never picked up on any of the other Bible things.
Yeah, they said people of the cross, so but they're talking about Christians, obviously. But I thought, maybe this is Esther and, they're the Jews, the Christians kind of thing. They had the Chick-fil-A reference there, seen by all.
That made me smile and laugh so
I was wondering
hard.
if you got that.
Yeah, I got that. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Waffle fries still sound weird to me. I don't know exactly how those work.
I think they're just... No, I don't know what they are, actually.
So by this point, I'm thinking, yeah, this definitely sounds like Esther. I've got this pretty figured out. Then we had Duke Ellington and Battle of the Bands reference, and I was like, has Wit's body been snatched by Bethany Shepherd here?
Yeah,
kind of
that part definitely made me think of like Bethany's flood and
yeah, that was my first thought. And then I thought, because the queen is trying to get rid of her so she can steal her land. So I was like, maybe it's sounding more like a cross between Esther and Namath's vineyard with Elijah and Ahab and Jezebel.
I thought, never mind. No, I didn't.
All the opening of the gates with Camilla and everything
found
had
that
a
annoying.
lot of silly sound effects. I was like, that's not a good sign in an episode.
Yeah, I was thinking like all the people who heard our positive reviews of the launch, they're gonna come to the OIC and they're gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be so good. Oh, there's a new one. Listen to it, and they're gonna be like, why did I subscribe to this again? They're gonna blame us.
Yeah. And then Friar Wootsbury comes in, and it's funny, you'd think Wooten would be able to keep his regular real-life name because it's already very Old English.
Yeah,
Wooten Bassett.
I think
it would have been perfect name.
Wootsbury's kind of a very strange name. Like,
And lies about his hair. Seriously.
The Battle of the Bands thing was probably just Wit trying to child things up-ish for Camilla.
It's Wit trying to be relevant.
Who's Wit trying to be hip?
Yeah. You're so unhip, it's a wonder you don't walk sideways. Never let that line die. Bart Rathbone. I probably just hit my mic.
Yeah, you did.
So yeah, lies about his hair. Really.
Yeah. Like, at this point, like I said, I was just like, my opinion of this episode just kept on dropping, because
Yeah.
when I read the summary, I love story tale, like, fairy tale stories so much. One of my favorite
Storybrooke.
Shush. Once Upon a Time is one of my favorite TV shows, because fairy tales, I have like Grimm fairy tales on my shelf over there, and so I was so excited. It's just like, oh, a spin on a fairy tale, and I'm like, oh, that sounds so good. So I went in, and then my opinion just kept on falling lower and lower each time someone talked or a stupid sound effect came in.
I don't understand why they made Connie so stupid here, basically.
I don't either.
Like,
I kept on thinking, like, what if Connie walks up to Wit while Wit's telling the story, and then it'd be, like, so insulting.
Yeah, he made the queen so ditzy. I mean, I guess it could be because, he was using terms he didn't know if Camilla would understand, so he was, like, kind of explaining things in story for her sake.
What's up with the onion thing? Like, that was weird.
I don't know. And
there's, like, no explanation at all.
In the documentary, and I was going to get to that, Nathan Hubler says that the story went through different type of like AIOO kind of things, and they only settled on a fairy tale kind of setting near the end, and the onions thing was very last minute or something like that. I was like,
but why would you put
why
that
did
in?
you add them? Yeah, what inspired you? Let's add onions or something. I'm also very curious then, what kind of setting was this story before it was a fairy tale? Like, was this a sci-fi?
Maybe it was going to be sci-fi, but they decided not to make it sci-fi because Cosmic Copper's right after this, and that's sci-fi.
Maybe that could be. I was going to say this could be an episode of Drake the Cosmic Copper then.
Camilla the Cosmic Copper. I would.
That's next month. Let's not talk about that.
Let's not talk about that. And assuming from the name, Drake the Cosmic Copper is probably going to be a horrible episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we haven't heard it yet, because this is March.
Exactly.
So then, just like to point out, because they kept mentioning you're, so many years earlier for that, and I didn't really think about it with beef jerky and stuff like that. And then finally, it caught my ear when he said you're 500 years early for the telephone, and I was like, oh, so this is taking place circa 1400 AD then. So that's something to note. And so I started realizing around this point, it's so not Esther then, I guess. Not unless the story takes a very drastic turn quickly. And then I was thinking, so maybe it's more like the nemesis then, because they're trying to keep Wooten away from the trial so he doesn't testify, and honestly, I've just about lost track by this point. Then again, if Wooten has to leave the country, it's more like rights, wrongs, and winners. And then Harlow Doyle shows up as Gandalf, I'm not sure how much more of this I can take, because he's like, I'm the old character in the show that shows up with these stories to be the voice of conscience.
I actually, even though that's like a major stereotype and like everything, I usually really like those characters a lot. Because they're like the only ones who actually like knock some sense into the characters' heads. So I'm like, good for you. Even though you're majorly stereotype, you're doing the right thing.
I had to re-listen to this episode yesterday because I was looking through my notes the other day and I saw this line, Harlow is Gandalf? I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. And I was like, Harlow's Gandalf? What does that mean? I don't remember what this note means at all, so I had to re-listen to the episode so that I could figure out what that meant.
I listened to it the other day. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten that either. Right after I listened to this episode, I made myself listen to it again, even though it was really painful to do.
So, all things aside, and that is a lot of things aside, I really don't see, at this point, I did not see what this has to do with any castle-related charities. This month must have been an awful stretch, I was thinking, unless something drastically changes again. And then Camilla goes, no offense, Mr. Whittaker, but that's one of the worst stories I've ever heard.
That was my reaction too.
I'm not one to normally agree with Camilla Parker, but yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah, when I was listening to that, I'm like, yeah, because I was really upset that it ended there. The line, though, with Connie, like, I want all the walls painted green in regards to her castle, that actually made me laugh out loud.
I was going to say that because I didn't notice that until the second way through, and all of a sudden I was like, yeah, because he said that before he said Connie's name at the beginning. So I didn't realize that till the second way through, and I already knew who was talking about her, and I was like... But yeah, I'll get to that. So, at this point, Whit starts explaining what's going on, and I was like, crap, all three of these guys are going to be from different stories, aren't they? I suddenly realized what was going on. I was like, no wonder I was so confused. So it was like, if Eugenius was Saul, then Connie must be Jezebel. I was like, I was right, it was Namath's Vineyard. And then he's like, she was David, and I was like, I guess that makes sense, because these are all people... Well, I was going to say, these are all people that repented, and Jezebel would not have been a good example of someone forgiven by God, considering she was pushed out a second-story window and ripped apart alive by wild dogs.
I thought it was snakes.
It was dogs.
It was snakes in the vase, though, wasn't it?
In what?
Like, didn't they, like, throw a vase at her that had, like, snakes in it, and then she, like, fell out a window?
Maybe. But then she got torn apart by wild dogs.
I don't remember that part. I thought she died at the window.
It was a gruesome Gatorka's death that we won't describe here because of the gruesome horribleness. Whatever. BTV Envy. Good episode.
I like that one. I like that part.
Heard it this last week.
I like how they use that twice for for the king, too.
It's good.
All BTV episodes are really good, except for one every now and then.
So, yeah, I figured out then, as Whit was explaining it, that Wooten was going to be Peter. I knew after Whit started explaining things, I was like, okay, that was actually pretty clever.
Yeah, I know. I'm listening to it, and my jaw just, like, drops open. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that moral was
I was so confused.
Good. It was so confusing, but it was so good once it was explained.
The story itself wasn't the best by a long shot.
The story sucked. Let's just get that out of the way.
The fact that they were able to mash up 3 different Bible characters who were all failed and then they were forgiven, and then showed all of their failures laced together into one plot line and then forgiven in a single story is pretty impressive, I have to admit.
I hated the ending. Like I'm glad that they gave the ending where everything... Okay, I didn't like some things about the ending, but there were some things I really loved. Like when Camilla was talking to Wooten at the end. Like, there was the thing about, like, that, oh, are you going to look after my sheep at the beginning of the episode? Or I'm thinking, like, yeah, I don't know where you're going with this at the end. And she's just like, are you going to feed my sheep? And then I'm just like, oh my gosh. That line.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
I loved that line so much.
I'm thinking about what this implies now. So the first thought was, if this is supposed to be Queen David, then does that mean that her consequences for her crimes... Because she's like, what are the consequences? Like, is it the lives of her firstborn onion crops, then?
I wish.
Can't even keep a straight face reading that one. I was really happy with that one. Whit sure played a lot of characters in this one by this point. And Eugenius says, "I've seen the light." And I was like, okay, that was pretty clever.
I know, and he's just like, I've seen the light, and that's another story for another time. The first time I heard that, I'm like, okay, hands down, that's the best part in the episode. Just that line. Like, when he's just like, I'm not going to get into it here. But then he said, I've seen the light. When I'm thinking like, oh no, I want to hear the story. And then he's just like, says all the other stuff. And I'm just like, genius. That part was so good.
And then I'm like, oh, I see what's coming with Wooten. As soon as he started talking to her, I was like, I see what's coming here, because he's her shepherd, and he's gonna pull Jesus's line about Peter looking after the flock. And then he did, and I was like, oh,
I
so
never
clever.
made that last connection. Because that was Peter
that's
that he said it to.
Peter apologizes to Jesus and for denying him 3 times, and Jesus asks him 3 times in a row, "If you love me, look after my flock."
I never realized that was Peter.
And that's exactly what Camilla does with Wooten.
This episode, such conflicting emotions.
Yeah, so
like you both hate it and you love it at the same time. I can't tell if it's genius or just stupidity with an amazing ending.
As I go on, I wrote the last 5 minutes definitely saved it. It still wasn't great overall, I think, but the ending saved it from being terrible and actually made it quite clever
It's
overall.
like a Doctor Who serial that's 6 parts long, and the first 5 parts are just terrible. And then the last part is just like so mind-blowingly amazing. You just don't even know what to do about it.
Still, the theme of the episode doesn't really have anything to do with the charity of the month.
What was the theme? Oh, right. Yeah.
Glen Eyrie Castle. So then I have a couple notes on the documentary that went where Chris and Brock and Evan and Nathan wander around this castle, which is in Colorado Springs, which is the
is
this
it like
Glen
a real
Eyrie
castle?
Yeah.
So it's a charity for building castles?
No, I'll get there. So, first thing, I was like, so Chris was doing more in Colorado Springs than filming the social shout-out. This makes a lot of sense now, because, in early February or something like that, I saw on Facebook, because I'm friends with Chris, that she was going to Colorado Springs, which is, kind of abnormal for the actors, because they record in California, not in Colorado. So she was going for something Adventures in Odyssey related, and then she was in the social shout-out for March, and I was like, okay, I guess that's why. Still seems kind of odd, you'd fly halfway across the country just to film the social shout-out. But then she was in this video, and that's why she was there, so that she could be in the video, because the castle, I looked it up, it is, what I was looking, Glen Eyrie Castle is in Colorado Springs, and was actually built by General Palmer, who is the founder of Colorado Springs.
That's interesting.
It actually looks a lot like the castle that I was in Victoria just a couple weeks before, over spring break. It looks amazingly similar inside, actually, though my castle was a bit smaller, the one I was at.
Stop bragging,
Craig Darragh
Devin.
Castle.
Stop it.
You'll see it one day.
Take me.
I was a little sad that the shots they filmed inside Dave's office didn't have any spoilers or future art, at least not as far as I saw. Because they kept ringing the bells on the wall in the castle, and it kept buzzing Dave Arnold's phone. And I was looking, every time I was looking over the walls, I'm like, they must have put some future thing up on the walls, because that's the kind of thing they do. They did that with the concept art for album 53.
I still say that the best concept art is the album that was drawn by Lauren.
That was album 53.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But, that picture.
That's one of my past profile pictures on Facebook,
I know. You had
actually.
that profile picture on Facebook for like months.
So, the fairy tale stuff that they said wasn't until the last few drafts, so I really want to know how it originally went then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's what they said. The onions were Paul's idea. I was like, I should have known.
Isn't he the one that came up with like the stuff for the launch?
What? No, that was Dave.
Oh, Dave.
But Paul is our Hussey Moffat of Adventures in Odyssey.
Paul. So. Wait, he wrote Life Expectancy, didn't he?
Sorry, yes.
How do you go from Life Expectancy to this? Have you no shame?
In like 8 episodes.
How can you write the most amazing episode ever in that part?
He didn't write the episode, though.
Oh.
Like, Nathan Hubler and Kathy Waringa wrote the episode.
Then what did he do?
He just contributed the onion idea.
Why did you do that?
Evan wandering around in the basement of the Castle Lost actually reminded me a lot of Merrick Plays Bloodlines. Just the look of the basement, the way it looked as he was wandering around.
For those younger viewers of this show, don't watch Merrick Plays Bloodlines.
Don't look that up.
Don't look that up.
Or anyone, probably.
Yeah, don't do it.
So then I finally, went to the website. So the castle is a tourist place as well as a Christian retreat center. So now it all makes sense. So that's why it's a charity, because it's a Christian retreat center inside the castle. So yeah, it makes sense now. And it made me wonder, since the story wasn't planned on being fairy tale and therefore castle related until the last few drafts, I wonder what the planned charities were beforehand for that month then.
Who knows? But it's time to rate the episode now.
Yeah, and the last thing, my one thought from the second listen through right at the beginning, which said, the queen always dresses in the finest shade of green, and I was like, just like you said, I was like, it has been quite a while since we've had a joke about Connie's green sweater, so that made me super happy.
It's been too long.
It has been. Final rating.
You go first. Ha!
This is hard.
I know! That's why I don't even think I can rate this episode. Like, I think we should just not rate this episode.
Up until the last 5 minutes, the episode was pretty terrible.
I would give it like a 0 or something.
The humor was fairly juvenile,
It was
and the
painful.
story was just weird. There was some over-the-top sound effects, and the onions was just odd. The names were weird and everything, and then all of a sudden, Wit,
he just
dropped the
blows
shoe,
your
and
mind.
it was like, what? It was
like, what happened to all this good stuff before?
Everything suddenly makes sense, and it's so weird. So I don't know. The theme in the end was really good, and the way they executed it with the stories was fantastically clever.
It was.
And the little things that they put in about I've seen the light and go watch my flock and things like that was like, that was really sneaky. So I'm gonna say 3.5 out of 5 and just not look back.
I don't know what to rate this episode, honestly. For the last, ever since I've listened to it, which was quite a while ago, it was over a month ago, I've been constantly contemplating what I'm gonna rate it. And I'm starting to think I should just say I'm not rating it because...
You're gonna protest like Sue?
It was such a bad episode. I did not like anything about it, pretty much. At all. There was 0 things I liked about it. Like I said, I was really hyped up for, this cool storybook adventure, and I got this. So I was just really upset. If it wasn't for the last 5 minutes, which were sheer amazement, and just me sitting there, just, oh my gosh. The last 5 minutes.
To be fair, I mean, like I said, it was written by Kathy Buchanan and Nathan Hubler together, so I mean, we probably should have expected more out of them.
Yeah. I don't know if I can rate this one. I have such conflicting feelings.
Just give it a number, just for the record. For the spreadsheets.
I give it 1 onion and amazing story ending out of 5.
1 onion out of 5?
1 onion and amazing story tale ending out of 5. I think I'm going to give it 2.5 because that's halfway and I have such conflicting feelings. I both love this episode and hate it.
You're not going to listen to it again just out of spite, aren't you?
Well, I've listened to this episode 3 times by now.
Okay, that's more than I have.
like, I listened to it originally, and I actually started this episode, like, 6 times, because I kept on trying to listen to it at night and falling asleep. So I've heard the beginning, like, a bunch of times. Same thing with the Cosmic Copper.
Well, that's the problem. That you listen to the beginning a whole bunch of times.
No, it's only, like, the
end.
first 2 minutes.
I know, I'm just
And
making
then-
a joke.
So I listened to it once, and then at the end of that, I'm like, what the heck? So I listened to it again, and I listened to it the other day on the bus, because I had nothing else to do on the ride to school. So, yeah, 2.5. I stand by that.
All right, fair enough. So that's him for now. And for Patrick, A Heart of Fire, Part 1.
So let me begin with my summary.
Wait, no, because we have to turn over to other Devin and
All
Victoria.
right. Never
Should we do
mind.
that with our... I always do the pointing thing, even though we don't use sliding transitions.
Where
we
do
use
I
static,
point?
because that doesn't work for
I'm
split
just going to
screen.
point up.
And I'll point down.
Okay.
Right now. Hey everyone, we are back with part 2 of episode 30 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. I'm still Devin.
And I am never Victoria. Think about that.
Are you Victoria?
No. Yes.
And now the weather. I'm just kidding. We'd have to come up with something a lot more existential if we wanted to make a Night Vale reference. So now we're going to be talking about episode 394. My goodness, this show has a lot of episodes. Patrick, A Heart of Fire, Part 1.
There's quite an episode gap between the last one we did and this one.
Sometimes I wonder if people see, episode numbers for Odyssey, like this, say, 407, something like that. They probably think that means Season 4, Episode 7. Because sometimes people will take the season number and the episode number and just put it together. Like the first episode of a show, people will call it Episode 101. Because it's like Episode 01.
It's funny because when I
Season 1.
first saw things like that, I didn't know people did that. So I was just like, wow, it's going to take me forever to get through this show. And then I'm like looking for episode 1 and I can only find episode 101. And then I'm like, well, I guess I might as well not watch this show. Because there's like hundreds of episodes missing. I eventually did.
Exactly 100 episodes are gone.
No, for like every season there were like hundreds of episodes missing.
Yeah.
And I eventually figured out. It took a little while.
That's funny. But yeah, I see that and I think, I wonder if they think that I don't realize, no, that's not Season 4, Episode 7. That is literally the 407th episode.
They'd definitely be missing a lot of episodes that
One
they
Piece.
just like skipped to every section in Odyssey.
One Piece ain't got nothing on Odyssey.
Ooh, yeah.
Or Pokemon. Or
Unfortunately, Doctor Who
Yu-Gi-Oh.
does.
Yes, but not a lot.
Yeah, not by much.
Not a lot.
It's
Less
almost
than
caught up.
100. Less than 100. At this rate, it will only be like 5 more years or something before Odyssey's caught up, which is quite impressive because Doctor Who is almost twice as old as Odyssey.
So,
Okay.
in this episode,
It is written by,
Yep, sorry.
let's say, yes, we're doing part 1, and next month we'll do part 2. It's written by Paul McCusker and Mark Summer. I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure Mark Summer was the historical consultant on this episode, and that's why his name is in here. His name doesn't sound familiar, so I don't think he's a regular writer, so I think Paul McCusker wrote the episode, Mark Summer was the historical guy to make sure everything was as accurate as it can be. What's the summary, Victoria?
So in this episode, Jared goes to Wit's End on St. Patrick's Day for a soda and ends up with way more than that when Wit notices Jared's new green sweater. So Wit points it out as being an appropriate thing to wear on such an occasion as St. Patrick's Day, and Jared promptly tells Wit he doesn't understand what St. Patrick's Day is about, and the only reason he wears green sweater is because it's new and his mother told him to. So, with this newfound knowledge, Wit takes it upon himself to tell Jared the story of, the life story of St. Patrick. So it begins with Patrick being born. So Patrick is a young boy who lives in England in the early 400s, who was sold into slavery in Ireland, where the Druids controlled their land and worshipped and sacrificed humans and animals to the false god Cromcruach. Patrick is sold at a slave auction so he can become a human sacrifice, but he is rescued by Michlu, Michlu, phlegm in there, Michlu, and proceeds to work.
I see phlegm.
Michlu, and proceeds to work as a shepherd for him for a number of years. Through this time of isolation, Patrick grows closer to God and learns to trust and put his faith in him. Once Patrick is an adult, God tells him it is time for him to go back to England on a ship. So Patrick goes up to Michlu and asks him to leave, and Patrick is refused. So Patrick just pretty much turns and walks out, and Michlu doesn't even notice because he's really unobservant. I bet he was like really upset about that later. He's just like, I should have locked him in his room earlier. Anyway, so Patrick finds a ship and is allowed on so he can look after the animals on board. This episode ends with Patrick and the members of the crew starting to make their way towards England.
Yay! Just so you know, since we don't have our cameras working between each other, I mimed out everything that you just described for visual aid.
Okay.
Yes. It was exciting.
I like writing these actually. I'm not taking these from Wiki or anything. I'm writing them myself.
With my help sometimes.
With your consulting help every couple, like once or twice in a couple spots. Mostly just for names.
I love this episode.
This episode is in my top 10, along with episodes such as like Gloobers and Groundhog J, and one of the episodes in the next review, which I will not say the name of yet.
Way to spoil how it's going to be, Victoria.
Oh, thanks. Unless I'm kidding. You never know.
I'm always curious about how this story really went down in real life, especially because there's pretty wildly different accounts between Odyssey and VeggieTales on the issue.
Because VeggieTales is such a great source.
I am pretty inclined to lean more towards Odyssey in terms of accuracy.
Me too.
But I don't know. There are different things. There's one point, and I'll get into that later, I'm curious about.
Well, if you compare, like, how willing and VeggieTales is going to get into the dark and
I was gonna say they didn't have anything about making him into a salad or anything in the VeggieTales one.
I was told by what's his name from Khalil, but not him. No, it's
Khalil.
Khalil.
Okay, yeah. And I'm sure, as I wrote here, I'm sure that Victoria is very glad that we are following up the previous episode with a Jared episode, even if he's really not in it all that much.
Jared is my favorite character, for those of you who know this. I am obsessed with Jared, and every episode with him in it is like gold to me. Gold? Yeah, I can't.
Joel is gold.
Jared and Jay, both names starting with J, yeah.
Everyone starts with J in Odyssey, Victoria, and the Bible.
Jared and Jay are my favorite characters.
But it goes, you're celebrating a day you know nothing about? And he sounds awfully surprised here.
Well, lots of people do that kind of thing.
Actually, yeah, let's face it. People don't know about 80% at least of the holidays that they celebrate.
Like,
and
who
Jared,
knows what Arbor Day is about? But to be fair, who celebrates Arbor Day?
Touché. And Jared already is not the child in Odyssey who is most known for his accurate historical knowledge. I cite in defense, quote-unquote, World War II. Okay,
I love Jared so much.
I'm going to go into some rants here about how fantastic some of Wit's lines here are at the beginning, and I'm going to talk about it for a long time. I wrote so much about it because so good.
Wit is such a good foil for Jared. There's so many great foils for Jared. Don't even get me started on how amazing the scenes between, Jared and Dwayne are.
Okay, let me get into this here, because I got really excited writing about this. I love how Wit gives this line. There are some denominations of Christianity that recognize people as saints because of the work, because it's a very neutral and diplomatic line. Now, Focus, as most of you probably know, is a non-denominational organization, and that was a very carefully written line. It recognizes that some denominations don't agree with the way sainthood is handled by some other denominations, but it doesn't defame the practice. It words it that some do, some don't, and what's not taking a stance either way. It's very general and nondescript. Now, following this is a quote I love even more. Following Witt's statement that sainthood is denoted by people because of their lives and work for Christianity, and Patrick was one of those people. And Jared says, he was that good, huh? Now, Witt makes an excellent response. He says, well, I don't know about being good. He was probably like the rest of us, very normal, but God put him in some remarkable circumstances. Now, this is a very cool line. It actually connects back to the previous line here about the way that sainthood is painted by certain denominations. Now, as I understand it, and I'm very sorry if I'm wrong, and I'm not going to name out any denominations here, just to be, make sure I keep myself clean.
We don't know much about saints.
I apologize if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it, and I could be wrong here, is at least one denomination that carries out the process of sainthood does it as such. After the person in question dies, people in the church will pray to them for certain things, such as injuries being healed or other normal types of prayers, and the church tracks how many times these prayers get answered, and after this dead person has fulfilled a certain quota of answered prayers, then they're made an official saint by the church. Now, obviously, I don't want to step on any toes here, and like I said, I could be misinformed about any or all of what I just said.
And we're very sorry if we are.
Either way, the process that I just described does not line up with the Bible to a quite fair degree. God is the only one that we pray to, and he is the only one who can answer prayers. To assume that any human can answer prayers on their own would mean that they have supernatural powers apart from God, and that can only come from the devil. So I'm not saying that people who prayed to saints were healed by the devil, obviously. Just want to make sure... I just want to make that clear, lest anyone understand. I'm just saying that despite the beliefs implicit in the idea of sainthood, or really the beliefs that many of us may unknowingly have about ordained saints, like the Apostle Paul, or John, or Valentine, or Patrick, despite all these beliefs, these men were no more good than any other believer out there. They were all sinners. They were all redeemed through grace by Jesus' work on the cross. All the goodness that is in them came straight from God, and all the good deeds that they accomplished were because they allowed themselves to be vessels of God, letting him work through them. That's what Wood is explaining in this short line, and I just want to make sure that we all appreciate that. Because that's everything that's being communicated in that one sentence. So I just want to read that line again to think about that. Witt said, sainthood was denoted by people because of, and I quote, their lives and work for Christianity, and Patrick was one of those people. Jared said, he was that good, huh? And Witt said, well, I don't know about being good. He was probably like the rest of us. Very normal, but God put him in some remarkable circumstances. So that's everything that describes. It also reminds us that, we can't say, oh, I can't do those things because, I'm not as good as them. You have exactly the same amount of goodness in them. You're a sinner, you were redeemed, and all of the good that you have came from God. You're on the same level as they are. You can be used by God in the exact same way if you let him do that. So, yeah, I just wrote a lot about that because I got really excited about those lines.
Nice little rant there.
Thank you. I'm also very glad that Witt acknowledged that while Patrick was, of course, a real person, historically there are some elements of his story which are true, some which are legendary, and mostly we don't know which is which for a fair portion of it. So... that I'm really glad that Witt acknowledged that and didn't try to claim, this is all exactly how it happened. He actually made a distinction there.
I have a quick question about...
We're not even 3 minutes into the episode yet, and this is how much I've had to say, and it's all so good. Yes?
Quick question. I know this is in regards to part 2, but don't cut me off yet. So the deer thing, I'm not going to say what that is for those of you who haven't listened to part 2 yet. Is that legendary, or is that yeah.
Witt said he doesn't know in the episode, I believe.
Didn't he say, that's up to someone else?
Exactly.
I always liked that line.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jared's just like, uh-huh.
Yeah, Witt takes, the hyper-diplomatic approach to this episode. La 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 la. Wit said of Patrick, he said that in his heart he believed the only way he would change would be for God to punish him somehow. Which reminds me that this story is a really great object lesson for being very careful in what you wish for when you're praying.
Indeed.
Still, you cannot argue with results. I always think that the name Crom Cruach, which is the druid god here, sounds a lot more Scandinavian than Gaelic. It sounds like something like Icelandic or Norwegian or something like that.
Who plays young Patrick?
I don't know. Look it up.
I always thought he kind of sounded like Dwayne-ish.
He could be. You could look it up. But yeah, AIOO Wiki is on the fits right now. It has been for about a day. The Kings in Connaught. This will never not sound to me like a really fake name. The way he says it, he's like,
I know,
the Kings in Connaught
so
do not.
weird.
He's like, the Kings in Connaught. The way Lochru says it, and then King Larry questions it back.
The Kings in Connaught. He sounds like
He says
so
it
pompous or something like that.
He says it very
But he's
rhythmically,
not.
and it makes me think of like a Dr. Seuss book or something like that, only adding to the fakeness attribute of the sound of the name. And then actually to tie to the episode we just reviewed, because Queen Constance said almost the exact same thing to Eugenius. You have the heart of a priest, or you have the mind of a priest, or sorry, I messed that up when I wrote it down.
You have the mind
You
of a
have
priest.
the heart of a priest
Yeah.
and the mind of a criminal. You should be in government. I thought, yeah, that's usually the sign that you should probably replace him. That's never, ever, ever a good sign in royal advisors, viziers, I'm looking at you, Jafar, or anyone who approximates that role. It is a good thing that Leary has his super amazing wife watching his back.
She's a great character. I really like his
She
wife.
is awesome.
Like, she's just like, she doesn't take anything from no one.
Nope.
She
But,
walks
yeah,
up to
that-
Leary, and Leary's just like, I'm gonna go worship Crom Cruach, and she's just like, no you not. And then he's just like, I'm gonna go do all this bad stuff, and he's just like, and she's like, no you're not, and he's like, it's for the greater good, and she's like, I am the greatest good you are ever gonna get.
They're making The Incredibles too. It's quite
Yeah.
exciting.
I want her to be the main character in Incredibles 2. How good would
But,
that movie
yeah.
be?
But yeah, Leary, he actually says to Lochru, you have the heart of a priest and the mind of a criminal. He notices that. He even says, you should be in government. Like, that's totally not an invitation for you.
Kind of ish.
That's totally not an invitation for Lochru to kill him and take over the throne. Like, if you recognize that, why would you trust him still? It's just
To
begging
be fair,
for him.
Leary he's kind of like a flip-flop character. I know this story is historical, but I always found it kind of weird how, like, at one moment he's, like, super smart and, like, making, like, good decisions for a king, like, kind of wise-ish decisions. And then at other points he's just, like, kind of not really moronic, but he just
Probably
has no
'cause-
idea what's going on.
Probably because that's how people actually are. It's quite realistic when you think about it.
Yeah. Mm.
And then they attack Patrick's village, and
Oh, the scene! I want to talk about this scene. Okay. Whenever, I don't know why, but I really love, like, I always, you know when people, like, lip sync songs all the time? Well, I do that with, like, Odyssey stuff. It's like, Adventures in Editing, but I do it whenever I listen to anything. And I always choose, like, my favorite character in the episode or something like that. And I used to listen to this one, and I have, like, I want a sword so badly that I have, like, 10 swords in my room at this moment that are plastic. But anyway, so then I used to take my plastic sword, and I used to, like, run around my room, like, acting this scene out. And
the sound and
the sound effects of this scene, like,
And the
when they're
music.
talking about how amazing sound effects are in a bonus
It probably
thing
yeah,
early
it
on in
stands out to
Odyssey,
me so much
they
because
talk
they have
about
that
this
bonus
scene,
feature.
and
Yeah.
they compare this scene to one of the last scenes, the scene where the imagination station is blowing up, spoiler alert, by the way, in the Novacom saga at the very end.
That's the episode I'm listening to right now, by the way. Exit just started 1 second before you called me.
Exit is an amazing episode, and they're comparing this scene. Like, if you haven't listened to this scene, this amazing scene.
Or to Exit. Oh, and they also compared to the Mud War, which isn't quite as good in the Buck stops here. Or the Buck starts here, sorry.
The Mud War is kind of like Snow Day.
It's okay,
because it has,
but...
Honestly, the only good parts in that episode are the parts of Jared.
Really? Excuse me.
I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge Jared fan, but it's true.
I know, it's true. It is true.
Like, his parts in that are like...
Nathaniel and Mandy have some good stuff.
Yeah, they have some good lines every now and
but,
then.
Yeah,
but
getting back to topic. The music and sound design in these entire episodes is amazing because they have all this cool Gaelic stuff through all the music, but this attack scene. It's unbelievable. I can, and I'm sure most of the reason why I notice it so much is, because of that bonus feature where they cite this as one of the heights of sound design in Odyssey. Oh, so good. Okay. Patrick gets captured and he's on a ship to Ireland and he's talking to this Julius guy who's from his village. And Julius seems to be extremely stable and non-remorseful as he talks about how their village is destroyed and everybody that they've ever known and loved is likely dead.
Yeah, I know. The only thing he is going for him is he's just like, oh, I'm Julius, the baker's son. I seem very attached to my village. Destroyed.
Your house too. I'm sure all your family's dead. I'm very unattached and unemotional about the loss of my family and friends.
I never liked my father anyway. He always made me bake the cupcakes. I never got to bake any of the bread.
Yeah. He's PETA.
He is PETA. Except British for PETA has more emotion. No offense to the actor. But I always wondered what happened to that kid. Like, did he get, sacrificed to, the volcano
Julius or Josh Hutcherson?
What? Julius
or Josh Hutcherson?
Both.
I don't know. I don't know about either of them, really.
I always imagined, because, Patrick was, probably, he was either, because he was captured at the same time as Julian.
Yeah, he would have been at the same slave trade, but he would have just been bought as a slave.
Yeah, he would have been either sold right before or right after. So my guess is, actually, I have no way of knowing, but, yeah. I always wondered what happened to him. I'm like, did he get killed or was he sold into slavery?
Who knows? Alan Young is, all over this episode.
Wait, that's him?
Yeah.
No wonder I liked him so much.
That's funny because I start to feel like, he's everywhere in this episode. I was like, I suppose it's only 2 people. It feels like more. Probably because he plays Patrick's dad, who's, appears at a lot of different points in the episode.
Oh, I never realized that either.
Which is lovely because his voice.
Alan Young, I love you so much.
It does make a lot of sense, of course. He'd be in this a lot because of his accent and all. Although technically he's Scottish, not Irish. But
is he actually Scottish? Does he actually have I don't think he has a Scottish accent in real life.
I don't know.
When Jesse and
I don't think he has one when he
in the official podcast. He didn't have one.
I think he was born in Scotland, but he doesn't have an accent.
He can do a very good Scottish accent.
Well, but yeah, so he probably...
Scrooge McDuck.
He probably grew up having an accent, or a slight accent. He doesn't, have it now because he's lived here for so long, but he can still, recall it.
Every single time I hear him doing an accent, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
I don't know. Look it up, Victoria. Look it up while I'm talking. Where was Alan Young born?
Okay. There's one scene in Kingdom Hearts, only one of the games where they actually have Scrooge McDuck being voiced, where you can actually hear his voice. All the other ones are text scenes. But, and then there's this scene of Alan Young just talking to Jesse McCartney as Ben, and I'm just like, this is so amazing, because it's my favorite Kingdom Hearts characters talking to Alan Young. It's just so good.
Now, to come back to what I was saying earlier, in the VeggieTale version, they said that Patrick's given name at birth was Maewyn Suket. I'm saying that because Khalil says it. His name was Maewyn Suket, or something like that. And Patrick was the Irish name given to him when he became a slave. Maybe it was the other way around. I'm pretty sure that's how it was. Personally,
Okay,
that
he was born
seems...
in North Shields, United Kingdom.
Okay.
I don't know where North Shields is. It says Northern England.
So close to Scotland.
Yeah, and that's from IMDb.
At the least.
So
Okay.
it's more accurate
Perfect.
than Wiki.
Thank you. At the least, like I think that's more believable than his name being Patrick all along, or at least, if it's not true, VeggieTales would have no reason to make it up.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that either there isn't enough evidence to substantiate the claim, and so you could either believe it or you could not believe it, and they took two different paths, or Focus simply never came across this fact while they were researching it, or Mark Summers didn't know that, and so it just never made it into the episode. Personally, I'm too lazy to look it up myself, so I will leave that up to you, faithful listeners, to discover on your own. Now, I personally have never been enslaved, so I can't give any absolutes here. But if I was in Patrick's situation, I don't think that I would really think about trying to escape from Michlu, or at least at that point. Because, I mean, he would...
that is his real name.
Maewyn
Socket.
Sukit?
Yeah, that's his
Okay.
real name.
You just looked it up?
Yep.
Well, they were supposed to do that, but
Well,
thank you.
I just saved them some time. You're welcome, people.
Thank you.
I wanted to know, too.
All right, so one point for VeggieTales, then, right there. And 50 million points for Odyssey. I don't think, I don't know. I'd certainly be worried about my home and family, and I would really want to know what happened to them. But the fact that he has a job here, he's being well fed, and he's being lodged for it, he's treated well, and he has tons of time alone to pray and think is actually pretty awesome. I wouldn't be put off by all that so much even nowadays, except for a few things I would miss, namely the final update of Homestuck. Really,
yeah, but if you were in this time period, though.
Yeah, but I said nowadays.
You're a horrible person.
Really? It was just like being a monk, except without, having a community around you. So yeah, I think I'd prefer being a monk over being a slave for Michlu.
I actually really like Michlu's character. I always think it's such a good thing he was there, or else Patrick would have been sacrificed to Crum Cruach.
And you have to admire.
What did happen to that one guy? I know we're not supposed to know what happened to Liam, but...
Who knows? Who knows?
I would say who knows, who cares, but I care a little bit, because I love this episode so much. And...
I have no idea.
Oh, we
don't even know if Liam was a real person or not.
This episode is in my top 5.
And you really have to admire Patrick's spunk in escaping, because when he decides he needs to sneak away from Michlu, he doesn't bide his time, he doesn't slowly sneak and store away resources or wait until he's watching the flock far away. He just walks straight out the front door and keeps on walking, and he doesn't stop until he hits the coast of the country. The man has gumption, I will give you that.
It's like that... It's like when you don't want people to notice you, just be really casual. Don't just try and sneak around or something like that.
Maybe that's the origins. That explains.
Be completely casual. No one will draw any attention to you.
Exactly. The origins of, and I will walk 500 miles, and I will walk 500
I have that song on my iPod.
Just to be the
That's David Tennant's favorite song.
500 miles to fall down at your door. Okay.
I want to hear Alan Young sing that song.
Last thing to add is the official guide's note on this. There's actually 2 notes, but one of them is specifically about part 2, and the other one is about both parts. So I'll give the part 2 one in part 2. This one I'll give for both of them, and it is this. And I quote, "The true story of St. Patrick. This album introduces St. Patrick. Though there are plenty of legends about him, not much is truly known about his life. Some say he used a shamrock to explain how God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit make up the Trinity.
Which appears in VeggieTales.
Others say he drove snakes out of Ireland. One thing is true, St. Patrick was an amazing man of God. St. Patrick was one of the first people to speak out against slavery. Few Christian leaders condemned slavery until centuries later, but St. Patrick spoke against it in the early 400s, perhaps he did this because he was once a slave. Jesus told his disciples to go out into all the world with the good news, but for more than 400 years, no Christians preached in places like Ireland, in part because of the deep spiritual darkness that existed there. St. Patrick believed the Irish were people created in God's image, and despite being made a slave at their hands, he took the gospel back to them and eventually changed the entire nation. Spoiler alert! Yeah.
You have to give Jared major respect points for this episode because he was like way more attentive than usual.
That's true.
Like, think about how attentive he is in like the wit Sunday school classes, and it's just like, oh, you have like a log in your eye. Stuff like
the hog in your own, the spam in your own, the hog in your own.
But like, think about like, and he actually comes out of the episode, spoiler alert, pretty well, and he's just like, well, thanks. Like, the last line in this episode is so, like, I don't like it. I really don't like it. It's like, oh, thanks, Mr. Whittaker. Now I can wear my green sweater with pride. That line is just...
So that's the end of part 1.
Yeah. Anyway.
Final thoughts, Victoria Francis.
5 stars. This episode is... This two-parter is just so good. And we haven't
wait,
even
we're not
gotten
supposed to
some of the
rate
best
it.
parts yet.
Wait, I just remember we're not supposed to rate it until after we do both parts.
Well, if it's in my top 5 episodes of over 700, I think they can assume I'd give it 5 stars.
I think they all know, but we'll do that next time. So, yeah, I think they all know what we're going to give it, but...
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know what you're going to give it.
I wonder.
Probably 5 stars.
Probably.
Probably.
So, next time is another discussion episode. They're more dense than the other special episode types because we have the most of them. And this discussion episode, do you even know what it's going to be, Victoria? Oh, I mentioned it earlier.
No, I don't actually. I only know what our next review is.
We were discussing the question, how does the imagination station work?
Oh no, that's going to take a long time to plan.
We're discussing this because it's something I've mentioned a lot of times. I keep saying, we'll have an episode on this later, refer to that. So I figured we should probably actually do that episode. I don't know how long it'll be. It's been a long time since I've really, thought about it again the way I have my headcanon surrounding that. I decided to make it a headcanon or a discussion episode and not a headcanon because it's not one concise... The headcanon episodes basically can be boiled down to one sentence. Like, Wit has a sister named Julie, or Wit's a Time Lord. Wit's a Time Lord, and you can, there are other things branching off of that, but you can kind of have that short little phrase, whereas the discussion episodes are all questions, and how does the imagination station works as a question, not a short sentence that I could sum it up as, and so it's a discussion episode. So, that's what we'll be doing next time. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube.
That is Devin.
And that's Victoria. Although we're not entirely sure, because we don't have any video to each other.
I just
Skype
pointed
is
forward.
Awful today. Skype is awful today. That's Victoria.
I just pointed forward.
You are Victoria.
You are Devin.
Oh, but I'm pointing out the audience if I point at the camera.
Wait, which way
You're
do I
all
point? Which way is
Victoria.
my screen? I'm going to point both ways.
I can't
Just in
remember
case.
which way it gets reversed, if it gets reversed or not. So, I don't know. I'll do a scarecrow.
I'm
That's
pointing
Victoria.
this way.
That's Victoria. I'm Devin. You're you. Keep
I'm
being
me.
awesome. We'll see you next time on
The Adventures
in Odyssey Oddcast.
I don't know if that was lined up or not.
Sounded like it on my side.
Me too.
Oh. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think we're getting better at it. Bye, guys.
Yeah.